What is going on, everybody? Welcome into our final mid-season episode of Studs and Duds for the 2024 NFL season. If you aren't familiar with Studs and Duds, this is a comprehensive NFL player review series where I'll be talking about the rising and falling players around the NFL, today the AFC South, and I'll be doing this through the lens of the ratings from my own custom Madden roster. So while those ratings do come from a video game, they do come from my own film research and do a good job to show how I perceive these players in real life. If you are playing Madden 25 and you want the roster, just search That Franchise Guy. It's up for you on whatever console you are playing on. Lastly, if you could show your support for this series, a lot goes into this thing. It is not the most viewed or most lucrative series that I do, especially for the time that goes in. So if you could show your love for the series one last time here and hit that like button so we could get this out in front of as many eyes as possible, I really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get started here with the Indianapolis Colts for their mid-season super stud, basically the player I felt worth highlighting the most. I am going with Bernhard Raimann, the left tackle here, who would have been this team's super stud or star of the month multiple times last year as well. He has just been on a meteoric rise towards being, I can't say one of the best left tackles in the NFL because there really are a lot of really good ones when you look at it, but he's heading into that upper echelon, if not arrived already. He had a fantastic second season last year after a very rocky rookie year, but this year has proved that that's who he is. Sophomore season Bernhard Raimann is who he is, and perhaps even better. I mean, he's allowed just 12 pressures this season, 6 of which came last week against Danielle Hunter and the Texans. He went the last 5 weeks before that, allowing 0 pressures. He's also been a menace in the run game. This has been just an absolute draft steal by the Colts, a really good athlete coming out of Central Michigan that was relatively new to football. Another kind of tally in the idea that you don't have to check the 33-inch arm length threshold. A lot of teams are scared of that number for offensive linemen. Well, the Colts have a couple of these guys now that they stole in the draft because their arm length was too short. Bernhard Raimann falls to the third round because his arms are 1/8 of an inch shorter than that 33-inch benchmark. And boy, are they benefiting from that. And with Raimann heading into his final year of his rookie contract next year, do not be surprised if we get word anytime in the next 100 days or so that Bernhard Raimann is going to be receiving $26 million. He has really played at that level as a do-it-all, high-end franchise left tackle. So well worth highlighting there. But unfortunately, this team is looking for a franchise quarterback, and that journey has obviously been well documented and has not been going well for the Indianapolis Colts. Anthony Richardson getting a -4 here, 72 to a 68. And Richardson's a tough case study because there's some really exciting stuff in there, and I definitely don't think he should have been benched. The Colts knew what they were getting into, and that was a project of a quarterback. But unfortunately, this season, he's been a little bit behind where they were hoping he would be in year 2, and they've obviously gone with Joe Flacco for the foreseeable future. But it's a tough case because there are a lot of good plays in there. There really are. And even in the game that he got benched, he made a bunch of really good throws against the Texans that just got dropped. He made maybe the throw of the year, week 1, I think it was, on that deep post to Alec Pierce against the Texans. And he's done a lot of good stuff with his legs this year. I think he's checked a lot of boxes in that way as well. But, besides the whole checking himself out of the game thing, I don't really so much care about that. For me, it's just you watch him down to down, and he just doesn't have a very good idea of where he's supposed to go with the football. And unfortunately, when you watched him early last year, that wasn't so much a worry. Of course, he was a rookie, and when he did have questionable processing and decision making, you would say, well, he's still very, very young. That stuff will come in time. But now in year 2, it seems to have gone in the wrong direction. It's almost like he's just dropping and randomly picking somewhere to go with the football. I know it's deeper than that, but just watching him, that's really what it feels like. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of processing going on at all. And you'd have to ask him if he's predetermining reads, if he feels sped up because he's struggling, or what the reason is. I'm just saying, based on the film, it's very random in terms of his decision-making right now. You saw some ugly turnover-worthy plays in that Texans game, back-to-back interceptable balls, one that did get picked right before half in just a horrible situation to throw an interception. So to see the processing and decision-making going in the wrong direction while also not cleaning up these massive accuracy issues that he had heading into the NFL and certainly into his sophomore season, had the lowest catchable ball rate in the NFL in his starts last year. So he just has to come down. The expectation has been dramatically lowered here on Anthony Richardson. I still believe in the talent. He's still incredibly young. I still think this is one of, if not the most physically gifted quarterbacks that has ever entered the league. But putting everything together mentally feels like very much an uphill battle for the Colts right now. And this 68 rating does put him below Joe Flacco, who's a 69. Nice. And I think that's very much justified. But the rest of the offense is, I would say, holding up their end of the bargain. Not noted here is Jonathan Taylor, by the way, who looks all the way back, which is great to see. I've got him rated as a 90. I think that's fair. But there was going to be some questions on if he can get back to his old self. This was a big year to determine that after it just hasn't looked that way the last couple of years. So I would say he is playing up to his very high rating of a 90, but I did want to at least mention that. But a couple of these young wide receivers are going up. Josh Downs just continues to check every single box you could based on his skill set coming out. I think it was a consensus opinion that this guy should have gone early, that this was one of the steals of the draft, and that's just been exactly what it is when he's been on the field. You know, the route running, the sure hands, the rack, making tough catches down the field. He's just a really, really fun ascending player in the slot. And then Alec Pierce, kind of back from the dead this year, really kind of fending off the hype machine that was Adonai Mitchell. Pierce has been the better receiver in that role, really. Obviously, you've got Pittman, you've got Downs doing their thing, but there were going to be reps to be won as that number 3 wide receiver, and Pierce has definitely outplayed Mitchell. Mitchell's been more of a disappointment than anything, just having a hard time coming down with some of these big catches towards the sideline and stuff. Not going to lower Mitchell, but Pierce does deserve to go up. It hasn't been all perfect. You know, he's still a one-trick pony, kind of a vertical threat. He still has some frustrating drops at times. But man, he has made some really big plays this year, especially earlier in the season. Very much in that kind of MVS bracket to me of not the most reliable receiver, but definitely an explosive, useful vertical threat. Then we've got Quentin Nelson. I mean, I've kind of been harsh on Quentin Nelson because we've just assumed he was the best guard in football for the last 3 years. And just frankly, watching all the Colts games, he's just been losing more than you would expect based on who Quentin Nelson is, everybody's favorite offensive lineman, basically. Well, he's back to kind of that rookie and year 2 form, really at that genuine all-pro level. His pass blocking efficiency, giving up just 10 pressures this year, is as good as it's ever been. And I have felt his presence in the run game much, much more. I think that 86.8 PFF run blocking grade, the highest he's had since 2020. I think you feel that. You feel this run game working a lot, oftentimes to the left side of the line there with Raymond and Nelson beating dudes up. But a lot of these offensive linemen are stepping up. It's a genuine strength of this team, and their ability to draft and develop here is really standing out in Indianapolis. Will Fries was having a monster season, a contract year himself. God, that offensive line was just so complete with him in there when Kelly was healthy, and he was playing honestly like one of the better guards in football for the first 5 weeks or so, and then he goes down for the season. A real gut punch for the Colts. Curious to see if they decide to pay him. If not, he might be a sneaky good free agent pickup for someone. But they maybe don't have to do that because they have other pieces stepping up here. Tanner Bortolini, day 3 center pick from Wisconsin, was just such a fun watch. Just this sawed-off, stumpy center with really nice athleticism and tenacity. He has held up really well in pass protection, man. I didn't necessarily think he would do that in his rookie year. And he's not going against slouches either. He's now played 100 snaps against Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, and Tennessee. Those are good interior D lines. And he's given up just 1 pressure this season. That's actually crazy. And you know, they've had some decent numbers in terms of drop back passing and stuff. This isn't some gimmicky play action oriented offense. So just been really impressed. It's only been about collectively 2 games with 1 start. So, he's got to keep checking boxes, but looks like yet another hit for this Colts offensive line. And then even another guy, Dalton Tucker, an undrafted pickup. He has won that opportunity at right guard with Will Fries going down, and he's held up his end of the bargain. He hasn't been as good as Will Fries. His pressure rate allowed is higher, not been quite as good in the run game, certainly. But for an undrafted pickup out of Marshall to step in and play like a capable backup is a huge win for this Colts team. But let's talk about this defense a little bit. A little bit of movement on the D line, nothing crazy. Dayo Odeyingbo is going to get a +1. He's had some really nice wins this year. When he wins, it's beautiful because he is this weird body type. He's half D tackle, half D end. He's crazy athletic. Sometimes he wins with power, sometimes it's finesse. But he is an explosive player. He's been inconsistent as he's been really throughout his career, but he continues to rack up sacks and pass rush wins and impact some games. So +1 for Dayo. And then Kwity Paye is going in the opposite direction. Paye he was not amazing in his rookie year, first round pick for this team, but he did at least look like he was going to be something of a draft hit. If nothing else, was going to be like a solid number 2 rusher for this team. And obviously they've been trying to get more from this group since that year. They've brought in Samson Ebukam. They've drafted other guys. They drafted Latu this year, who's been okay. I know some people are going to want me to talk about Latu. I think I was high on Latu. He's probably underperformed based on my expectations, but not enough to lower him in this series. But back to Kwity Paye. Dude, you go back the last 3 seasons, in just under 1,000 snaps, he has a pressure rate of 8.5%. The benchmark for like someone that should be on the field in the NFL off the edge is about 10%. That's like, if you're getting a 10% of pressure on 1 out of 10 snaps, that's like, okay, you can rotate as a number 3. He's below that for the last 3 seasons, playing a lot of snaps because of his draft pedigree. And this year, just 18 pressures on 191 snaps, just not cutting it. So he's coming down too, and I actually wonder if this team regrets picking up his 5th-year option, because that 5th-year option, he's making about $13 million on it. I don't think he's even worth that. So it's just been a really rough decline, really, from what was a pretty promising rookie season for Paye. I hope he can turn it back around. But right now, he just doesn't have ways to win as a rusher. He's not a particularly powerful guy. He's just not. And he only really has like swipe moves, and he tries to win with athleticism, but there's been no development in his pass rushing plan, which is just a bummer. But then into the second level, a bunch of linebackers have stepped up this year. Zaire Franklin getting a +1. He has made some hits this year that just pop off the screen. But the main thing with Zaire Franklin is this is a guy that's always racked up tackle numbers. But this year, he's doing that, but he's improved his tackling consistency. That's been a knock on Zaire Franklin, is even though he's getting all these tackles, he's still missed about 12, 13% of his attempts. He's gotten that down about 50% less. He's now at 8% missed tackles this year, so been an even more efficient run defender. He's just such a solid starting linebacker for this Colts team. Not the most dynamic player or rangy coverage athlete or anything like that, but a real starting LB1 in the league. Then we got Grant Stewart, who has had to step up. They've had a massive rotation of different guys here. Stewart, the last few weeks, has gotten a bunch of starts. He's got the long, flowing hair. He's got the right aesthetic for the position, but he's flying to the ball himself, taking a little bit of a page out of Zaire Franklin's book. So +2 for Grant Stewart, 64 to a 66, and that exact same mark for the rookie converted safety Jalon Carlise. They've been using him in that dime linebacker role that they have in this Gus Bradley defense, very similar to what they did with Ronnie Harrison last year. Carlise has taken that role, and he's done a good job. He's navigated the flow of traffic well in coverage, and he's been really consistent in his cleanup tackle work. So, not real linebacker stuff really going on with Carlise quite yet, but he's asked what they've done of him. in his first year playing linebacker, because he played like free safety at Missouri, even though he's built like a linebacker. He's a fun player. I know I just kind of gave him a backhanded compliment there, but I do think he could get there. It just takes a lot of time with this position. And then into the secondary, Jalen Jones is just a really fun player. I liked him a lot coming out. He just makes plays. He's not a sticky coverage player. He's going to have some really bad weeks, like straight up. He is very much a polarizing week-to-week corner, but he has really, truly elite ball skills, hand-eye coordination, and when he's in position and he has a chance to make a play on the ball, he finds the ball, he deflects it, and he oftentimes picks it off. He's had peanut punch forced fumbles. He's had, I can't remember who it was against, but he had a really impressive, there was a tipped ball, and he reacted to it really well. Did a good job to kind of flip his hips and keep his feet in for an interception. Not all tipped pass interceptions are created equal. So he's just a football player. He's not a great athlete, and just he has given up a fair share in coverage, but there is still something to be said about a number 2 corner on the outside of a zone defense that, he's going to give up some yards, but if every couple weeks he's flipping the ball back the other way by forcing turnovers, there is value in that. He's kind of like a poor man's Trayvon Diggs in that way. And then Samuel Womack has been a huge blessing for this team. Their highly drafted corner, Juju Brents, went down again this year, unfortunately, and they're scrambling for an outside corner. Samuel Womack, who they had picked up from the Niners, just in a deep secondary there, he didn't make the team. And man, he's been really good on the outside. He's been their best perimeter outside cover corner. This was someone with more of a slot background, so very impressive that he has stepped outside. A credit to Gus Bradley, who's been much more open-minded about shorter corners in his system playing outside corner. And he's paying back dividends. He's had some really nice games in coverage, more earlier in the year than lately. But I do think he'll hold on to this job for at least the rest of this season. And then the safety, Nick Cross, he's been a good player in run support. He's been tackling consistently. He had a nice interception on Sam Darnold, just kind of getting depth in his drop. He has unfortunately given up a lot of yards and big plays in coverage this year, so it's not all there yet with the young Nick Cross, who I think is still just 22 years old in his 3rd season. But he's getting on the field now, and I think starting to put some things together. So he's a guy that I would imagine is going to steadily climb now that he's kind of on that trajectory. But let's go down to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So for their super stud, obviously Tank Bigsby. I don't know who else you would go with for this team. Just a complete turnaround season. He had a disastrous rookie season. They wanted stuff from him as a 3rd-round pick in his rookie year, and just, not only was he having mental mistakes, but he just didn't run with physicality. He second guessed his run lanes, and I questioned if he was a good pick and if he was going to make it in this league. And something clicked for him this offseason. He's just a different man, and I think he's a different running back than he was at Auburn too. He's running with commitment and vision and intensity. Some of these runs he's had this year, and he's cooled off a little bit as of late, but he's actually playing up to his namesake, Tank Bigsby. That was something that bothered me from his college tape at Auburn. Was he was very much a slasher, kind of just tried to make guys miss at the second level, a one cut back. No, he's shown good patience, good vision, navigating through traffic well, putting his shoulder down, fighting for good yardage. He's 10th in the NFL in yards after contact, and 409 of his 515 yards have come after contact, which is an indictment on this team's run blocking, I think. But he just has absolutely passed the eye test this year, and I'm really, really impressed by his growth. And he's really put this team in a spot where they've made this Travis Etienne situation kind of weird. I didn't really know what to do with Etienne. He's been battling injuries this year, but it kind of feels a little bit like he's getting stashed in some way or another. I don't know. I really want to know Jags fans' thoughts on where you're at with Travis Etienne. Should he be lowered in this series? Does he get traded in the offseason? Do you see this turning into a 1-2 punch if he can get healthy? I just am genuinely curious. The opinions of those very closely following the team, because It's hard to really gather what's going on there. Etienne, obviously a very good year last year, but just nowhere to be found this year. He's hardly touched the football. But let's continue to go through the offense, and I do have to lower Trevor Lawrence. Now, he has bounced back to a putrid first half of the season, and he has played quite well in the last month. And I've never reached full-scale panic on Trevor Lawrence, and I still haven't. I still think he's a very good quarterback and still in many ways underrated because for some reason, and I know the reason, I mean, this guy was supposed to be much better than he has been, so it's understandable why people are frustrated that he hasn't become that guy. But he still is an underrated player and that he's still a very good quarterback, and I would hate to see this offense without him. In fact, we're going to see that on Sunday with Mac Jones. But he still is not free of blame. This isn't just Doug Peterson. Like, he has had some very ugly moments, and it's very similar to Geno Smith. Things we've talked about there where he checks so many boxes as a quarterback. Down to down, he looks like a great player, but then just any given moment, it could be the first snap of the game, it could be crunch time. You never know when it's going to come, but he will randomly assail a ball when he's generally very accurate and throws dimes throughout the course of a game, or he'll just make a throw where you're like, why did you force that? That was not there. A poor decision from a quarterback that typically is very cerebral in his processing of defenses and ability to get through progressions. So it's just the inconsistency with him. It's always lazy when you just throw that out there. But that really is the issue with Trevor Lawrence. So he's coming down. He's more in that QB 12 to 18 range right now until he can really start to rack up extended stretches of great quarterback play. But you know, as things tend to happen when teams are a disaster, it's not just one given thing. His receivers have let him down this year. The Gabe Davis signing was as bad and is as bad as you could have imagined when they made it. He's just not a really good starting wide receiver. He had some big moments there in Buffalo, but they were clearly prepared to let him go, no problem. And the money he got here was just kind of eye-opening. Talk about an inconsistent player, man. I mean, the consistency with his ball skills just aren't there. He can get open, but he'll drop it. Or they'll trust him on a contested back shoulder or using his big frame, and he's just not good enough in that way. There's actually a lot of like Alan Lazard to Gabe Davis's game in that way, where you look at him, you'd think he'd have these great ball skills and be someone you can trust in a pinch, and that's just not him. He's a decent deep route runner. He can set up double moves and stack corners. But even then, he doesn't always come down with it. So he's been a very disappointing signing. Thank God Brian Thomas Jr., as we'll talk about, has been as good as he's been. But then Christian Kirk as well, it's just time to lower him. I don't think he's really been straight up bad or anything. But there's never been a clear-cut moment in the last maybe year and a half where it felt right to lower Christian Kirk because he was so good in that 2022 season. But it's just time. He's had some frustrating drops this year. He's contributed to the issues, and he just hasn't been the weapon on this team that he was a couple years ago. So I still think he's a good player. I still think he's a nice slot weapon as kind of a poor man's Amon-Ra St. Brown type, but did need to come down a little bit. Now, Brian Thomas Jr. has been phenomenal. You definitely could have considered him for the super stud, but it's less of a surprise that he is this good. I think the majority of people thought this was a steal when Jacksonville got him. He had his detractors out there because he had some frustrating moments with his ball skills in college. And to be fair, he's had some big drops this year in his rookie season, but it has not held him back from having a great rookie wide receiver season. He is so much more than just an MVS type, an Alec Pierce type. He is a really good route runner over the middle of the field. He's incredibly dynamic after the catch. He just moves better than a guy his size is supposed to. And he's got good ball tracking. I know he has some concentration drops and stuff, but he really can look over his shoulder, fight off contact down the field, and make really big time catches down the field. He's a legit freaking player here. This is not Terrence Marshall Jr. coming out of LSU. No, this is something much, much different. So looking like a huge draft hit for the Jags when they so desperately needed it. And then their second round pick from last year, Brenton Strange, he's played a good bit. He does seem to have improved his blocking, which is good to see. And he's made some tough catches. Nothing crazy here, but a nice +1 for the second-year tight end out of Penn State. And then on the offensive line, Ezra Cleveland. The rest of the offensive line has been pretty mid, but I was curious when they paid him, because they traded a 6th round pick for him, and he started at left guard for this team around midseason last year, and he really struggled. Like week after week, he was just getting turned around, was not comfortable here. And, you know, they paid him before that big wave of guards in free agency. So they did get him, quote unquote, on a bit of a discount based on how much starting playing time he's had in the league. And I mean, this has been a godsend for them, because he goes from potentially a player that they could have let walk based on how he played last year to now, if he keeps playing like this, that's a legitimate bargain. We'll see if he can keep this up. But for this season, I mean, his pressure rate allowed is effectively half of what it was last year. And just watching the Jags, I mean, every single week, it felt like he was getting Trevor Lawrence hit, and that's just not happening anymore. So he's been a lone bright spot on the offensive line. But let's flip over to the defense. I am going to lower Eric Armstead by 1. This actually looks like a pretty good decision for the Niners to let him go. He just has not been the Eric Armstead that we know and love. And it sucks for Jacksonville because they paid him a bunch of money. But he's got just 12 pressures, 1 sack on 205 pass rush snaps. Hasn't really done too much in terms of run defense. That's not really his game anyway. This was supposed to be a number 2, a legit disruptor, opposite or in tandem with Josh Allen, as they have kind of waited to see what Trayvon Walker could be here. And you just really haven't felt him at all. I question if I should have lowered this even further. He's 31, so he's getting up there in age, but that's not a death sentence for these guys. I still think he could click at some point, but time is running out on that to happen here pretty quickly. And then I didn't make any changes to Trayvon Walker. I mean, if we did this after that Colts game, this would be like a +2. I mean, he had one performance this year where you looked at what he did and you were like, okay, like that's what you want the number 1 overall pick in the draft to look like. Like, no shade. He was so good in that game. And it wasn't just the bull rush. He won with multiple dominant bull rushes in that Colts game. But he was doing some good stuff with his hands too, to mix things up, and really had, good tackles in Indianapolis guessing. But the unfortunate reality is that's just been a complete outlier on his season. You have not felt him in really any other game. He's had some moments, but never really stringing it together to the level you would hope. He's still 71st in the NFL in pass rush win rate this year. So it's great to know that flash is in there. It's not like we're lowering Trayvon Walker. I feel better about him today than I did 2 months ago. But it still isn't enough to like say this is getting there, and he's trending. He's trending up, but he's not going up. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's still way too many games where he's just nowhere to be found. So it's just an interesting conversation. I'll leave it there. But then at linebacker, Ventrell Miller has had to step in. Foye Oluokun's missed some time here. He's been exactly what he was at Florida, a heat-seeking missile. Not always going to play with the most discipline. Gonna have some weeks where it's inconsistent for him, but man, he loves to hit, and he's a nice backup to have because you can get some really dynamic weeks from him. And he's a nice compliment to Devin Lloyd, actually, as is Oluokun. But Lloyd is like crazy stable, but there's a lot of Blake Martinez to his game as well, where he's like way down there in terms of average depth of target. So it's nice to have kind of a cleanup man and a guy that's going to just like fly to the ball like a maniac. That's Ventrell Miller. So it's, +1 for him, just kind of showing that he can do what he did in college in the NFL level as a backup. Then into the secondary, some good, some bad. Jerrion Jones has been a real pleasant surprise. I just didn't see much from him coming out of Florida State. They took him relatively early, I think 3rd round, and I was critical of this pick, but he's a playmaker, man. He had a really nice interception on Jordan Love, but that's not all he's done. He's the 4th highest graded run defending corner per PFF. He has 4 passes defended on the year. The main thing is you want to see him clean up the missed tackles. 27% missed tackle rate this year. I think he can get there, though. He does look like one of these frisky playmaking slot corners that could be around here for a while. Then Monteric Brown has had to step in. They've had injuries on the outside. He's been a solid Band-Aid veteran, corner on the perimeter. Not too much to say there. But then Ronald Darby, who talk about a Band-Aid, they bring him in at like 31 years old. Had a good year in Baltimore last year, but turns out he's not the only player in that secondary that's left the good setup that they had in Baltimore last year and struggled. But he's giving up a reception rate of 76% right now. He's given up 4 touchdowns on the season. He's just had a lot of ugliness, the veteran. Coming down there, not sure how much he's got left in the tank there at his age. And then the rookie kicker, Cam Little, had a very good start to his young career. But let's go to the Houston Texans. For their super stud, gotta shout out Nico Collins. I hope he can take the field, get back there this Sunday night against Detroit. But we spent a lot of time talking about Nico Collins and just how special he is. I think it got even under discussed as CJ Stroud was breaking out. Obviously, people felt like if you talk about how dominant Nico Collins is, you were taken away from CJ Stroud. And heading into the year, Nico wasn't supposed to be anything special. Obviously, CJ Stroud has done an amazing job of letting a guy like Nico reach his potential. But I mean, it goes hand in hand. I mean, Nico Collins himself is a genuinely special talent, and it's a guy that has the size, the Michigan background, presumably a high recruiting background, I can only imagine. It's a guy that tested well for a big wide receiver. He moves on tape extremely well. So he has all the physical tools. He's just never been in the right situation to truly produce and stand out. Well, this has obviously been that case. And you're now seeing a guy whose skill set is something, some cross of, and I don't put this lightly, but some mix, I would say, of the 2 Bengals wide receivers, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. He has that massive catch radius, the ability to win on the outside, to go fetch balls down the field, to elevate and win double coverage jump balls. Stroud will trust him in those situations, just like Burrow can with T. Higgins at times. He's got a lot of that to his game, and the size would speak to that. But frankly, there is some Jamar Chase in his game. The way that he can separate on these intermediate in-breaking routes, the ease of catching the ball in stride, the way he accelerates after the catch, how hard he is to get down after the catch. He is a dynamic athlete and genuinely in the conversation for a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. He was on a hot track to doing that before he got the injury there. He dominates to all 3 levels of the field. He is a truly elite wide receiver, in my opinion. It's just a matter of when does he check enough boxes, hit the sample size threshold to say he is a tier 1 guy like a Jefferson, Chase, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown. The skill set is there. The production has been there. This is a really special player that deserved his own kind of spotlight here. But with that, even with CJ Stroud struggling more in recent weeks, I'm still going to raise him. I've still been really impressed by his game. And honestly, yes, he's had his struggles lately, and I think it maybe turned down what you think about him in terms of beating the blitz, processing, getting rid of the ball quickly. Maybe I've turned down my thoughts on how good he is at that. Maybe 1%. Like, he's had some minor struggles in that regard that are mostly out of his hands. That's just, he's had receivers hurt, and his offensive line has been so bad throughout these weeks where the wide receivers have been injured. So I don't put it all on him, certainly, but what he's doing to win games for this team, to create plays when there's nothing there, this has not been what this team was last year. Other than Nico Collins being a special wide receiver, he hasn't had those easy throws like he had last year. He hasn't had the play action setups with these long developing plays with good pass protection. That's basically been non-existent this year. And there's been so many moments where the game's on the line. It's 3rd and 14, 3rd and 15, and CJ Stroud has made some of the most batshit crazy throws this year to keep drives alive, to have big moments with the game on the line, even in games where things aren't going perfectly well. But his accuracy on the move, his pocket presence, his ability to get out and extend plays, and his ability to find throwing windows that most quarterbacks just would not find, it's been eye-opening. So I continue to raise CJ Stroud despite his stats coming down and people finally saying, oh, he's struggling a little bit. He is. He is not dominating like he did, but still in year 2, I still think he passes the eye test for me. But the run game has been better. I will say that, especially when Joe Mixon's been in there. This has been maybe the biggest surprise from this Texans team is just how dynamic Joe Mixon looks. I mean, this has not been Joe Mixon the last couple of years in Cincinnati. Ask Bengals fans. They didn't really care that he was leaving for the most part. And a lot of people are like, okay, myself included, we're like, all right, Joe Mixon, I mean, he's a fine running back. He's not horrible, but just hadn't really had a lot of dynamic runs. I think his breakaway percentage was exceedingly low, like in the 30s the last couple of seasons, if I recall correctly. Just rejuvenated here in Houston. He just looks fast and explosive, and he's hitting these holes super well. He's been really good old dynamic Joe Mixon, so a +4 for him, really returning to form. There are some guys playing well on the offensive line, some guys going to go down as well, but Titus Howard has settled back in at right tackle. They messed around with him at guard with George Fant there last year, and it wasn't a good year for Titus Howard. Right after they extended him, they let him settle back in at right tackle, the position where he made his money at, and he's been so much better there. His pass blocking efficiency has skyrocketed back up. It looks like their former first-round pick is back on the right trajectory. He was an interesting talking point heading into the year because it was like, well, this could really go a couple different directions. He was okay when they paid him. He could get back to that form, or this could be one of the worst contracts in the NFL if he plays like he did last year. And he is much more returned to form and not been a liability for them. Their year 2 center, Juice Scruggs, has also been very solid. Pass protection especially has been notably good for him. He's really settling in there, looking like a good pick. They kind of went against the consensus board on Juice Scruggs. They saw a hardworking athlete that was going to put in the time to get better. I wasn't overly impressed by him in his rookie season, but this year holding up much, much better. So love to see that, especially when some of the other guys in this offensive line are really struggling. And honestly, 70% of their O-line woes can be pointed at Kenyon Green. Is that an overstatement, Texans fans? I mean, they had expectations for him. This was effectively his second season. He's just a former first-round pick that's missed so much time. His rookie year was a disaster, but I think there was hopes that he could get things going. No, this has been an absolute bust of a pick. They're looking to move him, and nobody wants him. He's not that athletic. He's not creating drive and stickiness in the run game, and he's been a complete just non-factor. I can't even say turnstile because oftentimes he's not even getting his hands on guys. He's just blowing assignments. His technique's all over the place. He has been a train wreck. So he recently got hurt, and it was kind of an honest, a harsh reality to say it's probably an upgrade with him leaving the lineup and them not sticking to him because of his draft pedigree. But unfortunately, my guy Blake Fisher, the young tackle out of Notre Dame, he's had to play a little bit, and it has not looked pretty. I still think he can get there, but I had expectations that he was going to be a good pick that could be a solid backup right away. Woof, no. He had one start earlier in the year, gave up 7 pressures to the Buffalo Bills, who don't have like this overwhelming edge group either. But let's talk about the defense. It's been overly disappointing for this defense that had expectations to kind of break through as kind of a championship caliber defense. Let's be honest, that was the expectation here, and that's just not happening, really. Worth noting is Will Anderson not going up here in year 2, the highly drafted guy with it, defensive rookie of the year and all that. He's just not been special. He's been fine, but him not going up, I would say, is probably a bit of a disappointment for Texans fans. Kind of we're hoping for that Aiden Hutchinson leap of sorts on him. It's just not happening. So throw that in the notes category, I suppose. But there's a couple other guys on the D-line that need to come down. Folo Fadukasi, he just hasn't been what he was for the Jets. This interior D-line has just been squishy, and he's playing a lot. He's not getting off blocks. He's getting driven back. He's just been bad, so he's got to come down. And then Derek Barnett, who had a nice reemergence for this Texans team, was kind of one of the sneaky good midseason pickups, and he was an impact pass rusher for them last year. It has not been the case this year. So, kind of a U-turn, if you will, from what he accomplished last year for Houston. And then into the second level, these guys have been solid. Henry To'oTo'o, I'm still not a huge fan. I feel like he still has his ugly moments, but he's been stable. They've needed to get some play from him. He does have 21 defensive stops on 154 run defense snaps. That is impressive. Missed tackle rate, which was a huge problem for him at Alabama, though, 19%. And I think that's an athleticism and a length problem for him. I don't think he can really wrap up NFL ball carriers all that well. So that's kind of why I still see him as a backup. But nothing crazy here. Plus 167 to a 68. But then Azeez Al-Shaair, you kind of figured this was going to happen. He gets a +2 here, 76 to a 78. D'Amico Ryans pinpoints him as the guy that he worked with in San Francisco. Shaair had a solid year last year for Tennessee, and he gets a pretty nice contract here for the Texans. A pretty clear breakout candidate for this team, and he has been just flying all over the field. He's had some really good moments in coverage, especially that I feel he hasn't had in years past. He's got 3 pass breakups this year. He had 2 the last couple of years combined. So he's showing up more there, but just playing so fast in run support. Thank God for him, because they're not getting a ton of other players to be contributors in run defense right now. But then into the second level, I'm going to go +1 with Kamari Lassiter. He's had a very polarizing kind of rookie season for a rookie corner. This is kind of more par for the course for a second-round rookie corner, where he's had some games where he gets picked on, and he's had some games where he's been a playmaker and a legit impact player for this defense. So you want to see him play with more consistency for sure. But he has generally been a nice pick and a nice fit for this Texans defense. And then D'Angelo Ross, a speedster that was kind of a roster bubble type of dude, has gotten some starts at corner, having to fill in for some injuries, and held his own. So +3 for him. All right, let's finish up with the Tennessee Titans. Their super stud, Tony Pollard. It's not the most exciting player to have this massive breakout year in Tennessee, but he just straight up looks way better than he ever has, in my opinion. Looks like a real feature back, running with great patience, vision, power, bursting through arm tackles. He's been the only reason they've been able to move the ball and stay in games offensively. Full stop. He's been really, really good. And the run blocking here hasn't been particularly good, but he's 10th in rushing yards, 16th in missed tackles forced, but 3rd in yards after contact. That's what really stands out, is the toughness of a lot of these runs. So +4 for Tony Pollard. You wish this was Will Levis or Treylon Burks or any, real investment with a long-term future on this team that can make a serious impact, but I think Titans fans will take what they can get as well. Unfortunately, Will Levis is going to get the Anthony Richardson treatment as well. Basically a -4 for Will Levis. Looks like we are finally going to get to see him out there again, but it's twofold here. Number one is obviously the lack of learning his lesson in terms of playing hero ball. The Jameis Winston, Carson Wentz, YOLO balls have not gone away. And that's frustrating. That was the main thing you needed to see him clean up. You just can't keep repeating those mistakes. But he's compounding that by also not really giving you the exciting stuff that he gave you even in his rookie season as well. He has just 2 big-time throws this year. He had 15 in his 8 games or whatever last year. So it's just not working for Will Levis. Starting to kind of lose faith in my guy here. I hope now, getting back in there for the second half of the year, we can see something, because I do believe in the talent. The way the ball flies out of his hands, the arm strength is special, but it doesn't matter if it's not there mentally. Calvin Ridley's coming down. He just continues to be a disappointing receiver. Great route runner, got the speed, makes some spectacular catches from time to time, but tons of drops this year. Just continues to have those awareness moments. Just the little stuff, whether he's not at the right place at the right time, not able to come back for the football or keep his feet down. He's just a frustrating, inconsistent player, nice player, but not living up to where we viewed him multiple years ago before the gambling suspension. Treylon Burks as well just has had opportunities, right? There's been wide receivers hurt. DeAndre Hopkins gone now, and former first-round pick just looks and feels like a bust, really no other way around it. I'm still slightly attached to the flashes we saw in his rookie season, but this definitely is not heading in the right direction. And anything you could get from him is house money moving forward. Now, the tight end, Josh Wiley, year 2 out of Cincinnati, a guy that tested really well. I thought he was stiff as hell coming out, but he looks kind of explosive. He's been getting some targets. He's had some of the more exciting offensive plays, frankly, for the Titans over the last couple of weeks, catching the ball up the seams, showing some juice. +2 for Josh Wiley, who, to be fair, did also catch my eye watching this team for the deep dive series this offseason. They might have something there. 6'7", got like 4.59 speed, I think. Like, if he's figuring things out, you love to see any young player stepping up for this Titans team is exciting. But then J.C. Latham as well, and one of their offensive linemen heading up. A +1 here, top 6 draft pick. I was very low on this pick. I wouldn't say he's been a slam dunk. I certainly wouldn't say that, but he has not been a problem for them. He's been very stable, an average, rookie left tackle season, an average first round rookie left tackle season. Honestly, he's had more frustrations in the run game in terms of blowing assignments, slipping off gaps. That was something he did at Alabama as well. So that's been honestly more frustrating than the pass protecting stuff. But he's been solid, heading in the right direction. They're doing a good job with him for sure. Unfortunately, Lloyd Cushenberry not living up to his pay sake, if you will. He got like $20 million at a couple of really nice seasons in Denver. And that guy's just not been there this year. He has been getting turned around in pass protection. I don't know how this happens. It's not like they're doing so many crazy new things schematically, but goodness, he has already allowed 14 pressures this season. That's as many as he allowed last year in more than double the amount of pass blocking snaps. The year before that, he allowed 9. And you feel it too. He's like losing quickly. He has got to clean this up. I think he can, but you really hate to see this when he felt like one of the safer, surefire signings of the offseason. Getting to work with, one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, in Coach Callahan too. So, I want to see that get turned around here in the second half. That could really help things offensively. But let's talk about the defense. This D-line has been pretty damn good for the Titans. That's been kind of the identity of this team, I would say. Obviously, Jeffrey Simmons, he continues to do his thing. Don't feel the need to change his rating. But T'Vondre Sweat, the rookie, looking like a really good pick. And I had a bit of a take on Sweat. I said he is what Eagles fans wish Jordan Davis will be. Sweat 3 years older than Jordan Davis was coming out. But obviously, parallels in terms of these hyper-athletic, massive defensive tackles. But Sweat was a guy that really seemed to get it at Texas, and he has been two-gapping at a really high level for a rookie defensive tackle. I mean, it just hasn't always been the case for these big DTs to come into the league and do that. Look at Maisie Smith in Dallas. So just really impressed by what he's doing to open things up here. You're seeing Sebastian Joseph Day here going up. He's returning to form with a little bit more room to operate there. Jeffrey Simmons has been a presence. It's just a large gravitational pull that he demands. And he's had his flashes as a rusher, but it's been more of what he's doing as a run defender. And as long as he can, show that he's going to be a professional, he's going to, focus on football, stay off the drinking and the partying and all that stuff, take care of his body. That was really the only question on Sweat. And they took a risk on him. So far, it's paying dividends. So a lot of credit for him. Could make an argument he could have been this team's super stud. But on the edge, Arden Key has actually just been a really solid signing for them. He's nothing special, but he's been their best edge rusher, better than Harold Landry. He's had some games where he's been a legitimate impact getting after the quarterback. So he's getting a +1. And he's a fun player, too. He was a guy with a high recruiting pedigree that had a fall off entering the league, and he's kind of matured himself. So you do love to see that for these guys as they mature and get into their mid to late 20s. They're not, slacking off, really, is what it is. They're not messing around like they were as these prospects coming into the SEC fed with a silver spoon. They understand that at some point you got to put it in the work. And Arden Key has absolutely done that, developed his pass rush repertoire, put on weight in a good way. And he's just a good pro. Then you got Jack Gibbons. He's back into the starting lineup. They've had a couple different guys, and it's like everything comes back to me, the scrappy, unathletic, undrafted linebacker that has played really well for you. And he's flying around. He's made some hits. He's been a really good impact in run defense the last couple of weeks. I think they're going to stick with him. A lot of Alex Singleton vibes with Jack Gibbons. And then into the secondary, man, both of their I mean, really all three of their major free agent signings, as you look at this, have been a disaster. I mean, Calvin Ridley has not been what they paid him to be. Lloyd Cushenberry, we talked about, and L'Jarius Sneed. He's hurt now, but even when he was out there, he was genuinely one of the worst starting corners in the league for the first 4 or 5 weeks. He was getting genuinely picked on, very uncomfortable in this defense. I don't know if it's just the scheme change. It's more of a zone forward system with this Mike McDonald approach, as opposed to what he was doing in Kansas City, where it was just, play physical, get in guys' face. I hope he can turn it around, and this isn't a J.C. Jackson situation. But early returns have not been there, and of course he's hurt as well. But they do have some young guys playing well in place of him. Jarvis Brownlee, really fun player, man. Kind of similar to what we talked about with Jalen Jones, where he's going to take his losses. He's not the most athletic guy. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the most consistent coverage player by any stretch of the imagination. And he's had moments where he's given up a lot of yards this year. But an incredibly frisky playmaker. He's got the ball skills. He'll contest the ball when he's in position. But what he does as a run defender is really fun, too. I can't remember who it was against. It might have been week 1 against the Bears. But he had a play where he like blew up an offensive lineman that was trying to block him on the perimeter and then made the tackle on a play to the flat. Like, that's the type of guy he is. Like, he plays with that reckless abandon, like every snap is his last. This is a guy that was jumping balls at the Senior Bowl. He had a couple one-on-one reps where it felt like he knew what route the receiver was going to run. He like ran it for him and had a really impressive couple of reps like that at the Senior Bowl. So he just passes the eye test to me. And hell, maybe if he reaches a point where his football IQ can get, into that elite echelon, maybe you could be talking about a legit, starter for this team, like a long-term piece. There's kind of a little bit of like that Josh Norman, Rasul Douglas, maybe, just the really smart, frisky corner. He's got a chance. I really like him. And then Darrell Baker, they picked him up from Indianapolis. Hadn't played a ton. He was someone that played a little bit of safety in Indianapolis, but they didn't have room for him. Titans pick him up off the chopping block, and he's had to get some starts on the outside and held up very well, frankly. Better than L'Jarius Sneed had played for them. You don't expect that to continue, obviously, but a little bit of love there for Darrell Baker. So that is going to do it for not just AFC South Studs and Duds. That concludes our mid-season Studs and Duds series. We will be back with a wide receiver tier maker video, getting back to some of that type of content for the rest of the season. I want to start maybe taking a look at some prospects and begin that transition to draft stuff. So exciting times ahead for the channel. Make sure you're subscribed, of course, if you aren't. Please do hit that like button on the way out. I really appreciate it. Let me know your comments. If you think I missed anybody, went wrong on anybody, would love to hear from you guys. But yeah, we're out of here. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.